So when they come in, no, we have, by the way, 59 people that signed up.
Okay, that's pretty good.
That's very good. We'll see how many show up. I sent everybody a reminder
I might blur my background.
because it's hard to find. Hi, Dina. You're muted and you're welcome to unmute.
Hello.
Until we start, we're happy to chat with people. And we are recording this, so it will be online. You had asked, I think it was you, Dina, that said you missed a meeting and you wanted to know if that was recorded. But I don't remember now which one you missed.
I don't believe that was me. And hello, CJ.
Hi.
Oh, okay. Okay, there's somebody with a similar name. And I've got several of those. So, anyways, are you in book club, Dina?
Yes. I just joined. So this
I
is
think
my
it was
second
the book
meeting.
club that you were asking me about.
I don't remember.
Okay, well, that's all right. The book club does not get recorded.
Okay, yeah. It may have been that. I'm finishing a little late dinner and the dogs are very interested in what's going on here. Hello, Kathleen.
Okay. Hi, Kathleen.
Oh, hi there. How's everybody doing?
But how about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing great. I went to the Reds parade today, and that always makes me feel good. The opening day parade.
Yes.
It's a lot of fun.
We had it on our big screen TVs at the mother house and had a luncheon from the Reds, hot dogs, hamburgers.
And did they win?
They didn't.
Oh,
They were
okay.
winning, and the Channel 9 people said that they had won, and then the one guy hit a 3-run homer, and they lost 6-3.
Oh dear. Okay.
That was not good. Hi, Teresa.
You're muted. You're welcome to unmute. While we're waiting for people to come in, we can just be chatty.
Hi, Maggie. Hi, Karen. I love that photo, Maggie. Thank you.
Hello.
Good.
It was
Good.
beautiful.
Yeah, those trees are around everywhere.
Maggie's in North Carolina.
Yeah, and some of them are beginning to drop their blossoms, but that one just screamed, "I need to be photographed." So
And Karen, I just realized our field trip is next Friday.
you're muted, Karen.
You're muted, Karen.
You're welcome. Everybody's welcome to unmute.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure how many tulips we're going to see in bloom.
Oh no.
I was there last week. There's lots of sprouts. I wasn't at the zoo this week, but they were off campus, but we'll see. We'll see.
It's
Hopefully
supposed to be
a
a warm
couple.
week, so.
Yeah.
Start. Hi, Susie. Welcome.
Thank you.
CJ, at the end, can I make a 30-second announcement?
Sure.
Okay.
Just remind me, that's all. Joanne, you remember that.
I'll make myself a note.
There you go.
And I'll have an announcement too about the book club.
Okay, hi, Mike.
Hey,
Hi, Mike.
thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Susan's our eco tips person.
Yes, and you do such a wonderful job with that, Susan.
Well, thank you. That's one of the few things that my memory can allow me to still do.
I don't know how you come up with all of the things that you do.
I search a lot of websites and other programs.
And, you know, it's all important.
Mhm.
Have you read the book A Year Without Garbage?
No, I haven't.
I just picked it up at the library and it's very helpful.
A year without garbage?
Yeah,
I'm writing it down.
I
okay.
am too.
I am too.
I'm in the middle of reading After the Doom, Wisdom and Courage for a World Falling Apart.
Feels like it, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Hi, Janet. Welcome.
Thank you. Don't let me interrupt.
No, we're
Chatting.
waiting for people to join. We'll give them a few more minutes. So we're just chatting. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And many of you are very active and we're so grateful.
Mhm. I talk about FCGG at all the meetings I go to across the country.
You do.
We were invited to join URI, and I think, and CJ is going to be our representative for
Well, I
that.
have contacted them, but have gotten no response from them. I contacted them right after you sent me the
Yeah,
information.
yeah. She sent me a thank you note, and I thought you were copied on that, and that was it. And I haven't heard back.
No, I haven't heard anything. And no, you got that thank you note before I even contacted her.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I think there was another one, but
But I think I'll try
I'm
again.
making a note to I'll ask Geneva. She's on their board.
Okay. URI is United Religions Initiative, and they're an international group that does a lot of really good stuff. I worked with them at the United Nations.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, it was really an honor that we were invited
Mhm.
to be part of their program. As CJ said, it's worldwide. And they have, you can look on their website. I guess it's just uri.org. Would that be correct?
I think so.
I think so too. Anyways, if it doesn't come up, check United Religions
Initiative.
Initiative. Thank you. Yeah, it was sort of out of the blue. I wasn't familiar with it, but I talked to CJ and she was very familiar with them and they do a lot of really wonderful things. And so it was quite an honor.
Their rep at the UN was the president of the Interfaith Committee, and I was the vice president. So we worked together for several years.
That's so neat.
And she was a delightful person.
We'll give people one more minute. They're still coming in quite a lot. We had almost 60 people sign up for this.
Yeah.
We have 18 people on right now, so we'll give a couple more minutes.
I usually figure about half of those who signed up will show up.
Yeah. And when I see several of you that are in the book club, and Mimi just joined and she is helping us quite a bit with getting books from the library. So hi, Mimi.
Hello.
Hello.
Good. I'll do 2 more people and then we'll just start. How's that, CJ?
That sounds
It's
fine.
like I said, they're still coming in and I can let them in when you get started.
Okay.
I think we'll just go ahead and start. So, welcome everybody. And I'm glad you're here. And I know you all know about Faith Communities Go Green. So, thank you for your support. And I'm going to turn it over to CJ for her presentation on Cranky Uncle versus climate change.
Okay. Okay, as I was preparing this, I realized that a lot of what is in it is certainly pertinent to what we're experiencing today. And a lot of the tools that were given to work with climate change can be used elsewhere. And of course, I don't know why it's doing that for no reason. It comes from a book called Cranky Uncle versus Climate Deniers, and it's how to understand and respond to climate change deniers. Most of the material in this book or in this presentation, is taken from the book, which is by John Cook. And you'll enjoy his work because not only is he a climate scientist, but he's also a cartoonist. And his book is largely cartoons, but they address very serious problems. So I just want to start with a few definitions. Weather is, of course, short-term, limited area, and it can change rapidly, sometimes difficult to predict. So it's what's happening outside our windows right now. Climate, however, is long-term over a wide area involving seasonal changes, and it's measured over long spans of time. So it's the average of many years of observation. When we talk about global warming, we're talking about the long-term rise in the average temperature of the Earth's climate. And it is what underlies climate change. For a long time, we were just using the term global warming. And then you had people saying, well, it was cold today, so we can't be having global warming. But global warming is what's like underneath all of the climate change we are experiencing. And it's mainly human-caused increase in global surface temperatures. Climate change includes both global warming as well as its effects. So the greenhouse effect on the left side is perfectly natural. On the right side, we see that because of CO2, it's blocking the re-radiated heat from getting back out. That's what's causing the warming of the climate. And carbon dioxide's invisibility is what causes global warming. So we know that greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, are invisible to visible light, letting sunlight pass through our atmosphere and warming the earth. However, greenhouse gases are acting like a blanket and it's trapping that heat. Burning fossil fuels adds to that extra heat. And these extra gases trap more heat, and that's what this is the cause of global warming. And so when we talk about climate change, this is what we're talking about, okay? We're talking about a warming climate. Whoops, sorry. We're talking about a warming climate that is causing all of these other things. So we are seeing less snow and ice, thawing permafrost, changes in plant life cycles, warmer oceans, rising sea levels, damaged corals, stronger storms, higher temperatures and more heat waves, more droughts and wildfires, changes in animal migration and life cycles, changing rain and snow patterns. And we are seeing all of that. A recent report on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia says that half of it is gone now. And I used to live on a Caribbean island and loved to go snorkeling. And what you could see below the surface was phenomenal, and it's just not there anymore. Okay? We are seeing warmer oceans. Okay? So the major impacts of climate crisis globally include stronger hurricanes, climate refugees, more droughts, mass extinction of species, water scarcity, crop failure. All of that is a part of the climate crises we find ourselves in right now. And this diagram here shows us that in the center are the drivers of climate change. So we see greenhouse gases, aerosol emissions, and land use change. Okay? But then what that causes is in that lighter blue ring. We see changes in the hydrological cycle, warmer land and air, warming oceans, melting ice, rising sea levels, ocean acidification, global greening, changes in ocean currents, more extreme weather. And then on the very outside, we're seeing what the impacts are. And we are seeing the impacts these days in our lives, in our country, around the world. Food insecurity, risk to water supplies, conflict and climate migrants, localized flooding, flooding of coastal regions, damage to marine systems, fisheries failing, heat stress, habitable regions of pests expands, forest mortality and increased risk of fires, damage to infrastructure. I mean, look at what's happening in North Carolina right now. It has the largest fire in the country at the moment. And that's not an area where you usually see wildfires. Okay? So one of the things we're seeing right now is that the planet's variation, I'm sorry, I've got this on the bottom and I can't seem to get rid of it on my screen. Every time there we go. The planet's vast Arctic regions are warming at least 3 times as fast as the global average. And that's very concerning. So the Arctic sea ice is melting due to the climate crisis and the effects of pollutants like black carbon that come from the ships. As the sea ice disappears, of course, the surface of the water is much darker than ice. And so the ocean is exposed, reflecting less sunlight. Of course, then the ocean absorbs more heat, and then it releases more heat into the atmosphere, causing more Arctic and global warming, exacerbating the climate crisis. Okay, since 1980, the amount of summer ice has almost dropped in half. In another 15 to 20 years, the summer ice may disappear completely. And the consequences of that are the albedo, the reflectivity of the Earth, will decrease. Sea ice reflects around 90% of the sunlight that reaches it, but ocean water only reflects 6%. Look at the difference there. An ice-free summer Arctic Ocean will absorb much more heat, and this will accelerate global warming. It's a positive feedback loop. You remove the snow, darker surfaces warm up, melting more snow, exposing more dark surfaces, melting more snow. So we enter into a feedback loop that simply doesn't stop. In the last several years, we've seen things like 100 degrees in Siberia. Now, we do not think of Siberia as a place that reaches 100 degrees, but it has done so on several occasions now. Okay. Another major problem is thawing permafrost. Many communities, people have built houses, roads, bridges, and other infrastructure on top of permafrost. What you're looking at there is from Canada's Northwest Territory. That road was built on permafrost. So what is permafrost? It's actually soil that is frozen, and it covers a wide belt spanning Alaska, Canada, and Russia. And it covers about a quarter of exposed land, and it's generally thousands of years old. Permafrost doesn't usually melt, okay? But locked into the permafrost, unfortunately, is an estimated 1.7 trillion tons of carbon in the form of frozen organic matter, the remains of rotted plants and long dead animals trapped in sediment and later covered by ice sheets. Permafrost soils contain roughly twice as much carbon, mainly in the form of methane and CO2, as Earth's atmosphere. So here's the problems we're having. It releases pathogens. It threatens to unlock disease-causing bacteria and viruses long trapped in the ice. It can expose ancient microbes and viruses that have been frozen for centuries or even millennia, potentially leading to the emergence or resurgence of diseases like anthrax, smallpox, and the 1918 Spanish flu. There's a possibility also that thawing permafrost could also release novel, undiscovered pathogens, including antibiotic-resistant bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Okay? It's releasing chemicals. It's providing more contaminated sites, and these contaminants can leach into groundwater, lakes, and rivers, which impacts our water quality. Okay, it releases oil and gas waste. It exposes old oil and gas sumps, potentially releasing water and toxic materials into the environment. It causes ground instability, where you just looked at that road, which was collapsing due to the melting of the permafrost. It can also lead to changes in access to water sources. It causes ecosystem damage by totally disrupting ecosystems, causing changes in vegetation, wildlife habitats, and diversity. And it contributes to sea level rise. Okay. So here's looking at what's happening in Alaska right now. Okay. And scientists are telling us that permafrost melt could destroy a third of all Arctic infrastructure, affecting as many as 4 million people. People have lived in these places for hundreds and thousands of years. And this is what's happening now. And I'm sure many of you remember the proverb which says, you know, a frog who jumps into boiling water will immediately jump out. But a frog who is in a pot where the water is gradually boiled will eventually die because he doesn't sense the danger. And that's what this cartoon here is showing. The one is saying, my calculations indicate we're slowly boiling alive. The other one says, I don't feel anything. And the third one says, alarmist. And that's kind of where we're at with climate change right now. Okay. So we know that the CO2 in the atmosphere is continuing to increase. And levels of between 280 through 350 parts per million create the climate that let humanity build and feed the modern world. And scientists keep telling us that the farther we get from those levels, the more we run the risk of disturbing that balance and reaching what they call tipping points that we can't undo. This is where we're at as of yesterday. Remember, 350 is the highest, they say. Yesterday, we were at 428.37 parts per million. This is actually measured hourly at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. Look at the change just from last year. Okay. And this is now we start with some of his cartoons. Okay. And this is what Dr. Cook says. Here's the problem. If we look at the cartoon on the left, this is what we're built for. You know, immediate danger, we respond. He says, but what we face now are all these charts and graphs telling us how bad things are. So we walk by like, oh, just a graph. It doesn't have the same impetus to want to do something as the picture on the left does. Now, we know that 97% of climate scientists agree humans are causing global warming. Okay? So Cranky Uncle says there is no scientific consensus that we're causing global warming. And his nephew says, but 97% of climate scientists agree on human-caused global warming. Why bring up consensus? Science isn't decided by consensus. So I'm going to put up two charts here. This is the first one. This is our country. In 2020, we had $22 billion disasters. 22. 4 years later, we had $27 billion weather and climate-related disasters that impacted the US. And if I asked you to list them, I'm sure many of you could come up with at least 10 right away. We've seen much more severe weather in terms of tornadoes. Last week, there were what, something like 52 tornadoes in one evening? And the damage is causing is catastrophic. The wildfires we saw in the Los Angeles area. But we're seeing these things all over the country. It's not just in any one place anymore. Okay? In the last since 1998, we have 10 of the hottest years on record. Okay, and notice how it goes up every single year. Okay. This is the share of people who believe in climate change and think it's a serious threat to humanity. So almost 70% of the people in this country do think it's a problem. The areas that have no color are where no information is available. But where it's really, really dark blue is where people are truly being affected and their lives are being affected by climate change on an almost daily basis. Okay. So the guy on the left says, act fast, it's a global emergency. And the climate skeptic on the right says, take it easy, it's normal, we always have changes in the weather. Doesn't understand the difference between weather and climate. And this is the book I'm taking this from. If you want a really good book to read, very easy to read, it's Cranky Uncle versus Climate Change. Okay, so we see people saying climate change is a hoax, fossilfuelsforever.org. And we are seeing the fossil fuel companies, you know, especially under the current administration, wanting to release more and more in the parks, in the national parks. Our climate is building up 4 atomic bombs worth of heat per second at the present rate. Okay, so let's look. A genuine skeptic considers the evidence, okay, and then comes to a conclusion. And science has lots of skeptics because they want to ensure that what they are saying is accurate. So when we look at the second climate denier, the science denier, he first makes up his mind, then he denies inconvenient evidence. So we have the gentleman on the bottom left says, the world scientists agree climate change has already begun. Pope Francis says man-made climate change is a threat to life on Earth. And the gentleman on the third panel says, I can't hear you. And that's where we stand right now. We have genuine skeptics, and that's quite all right. Critical thinkers are always genuine skeptics. But deniers make up their mind without looking at the evidence. And then they simply look at what's convenient for them, not the inconvenient parts. So this part is really important. It's the characteristics of science denial. But I don't just want to say science denial. I think it's denial in general. When we don't want to hear something, these are the kind of tools that we employ. So he says it's fake. We use fake experts, logical fallacies, impossible expectations, cherry picking, and conspiracy theories. Now let's look at those. Here's the techniques of science denial. And so you have the FLICC at the top with the major categories. But underneath each of those categories are different ways that they are used. So like, for instance, under fake experts, we see lots of people saying this isn't true. We see a magnified minority, or we hold fake debates. Under L, we see logical fallacies, and that includes all of those things along the bottom, and we're going to talk about those. Under I, we see impossible expectations and moving the goalposts. C, we see cherry picking. And the last C, we see conspiracy theories. Notice all of the conspiracy theories. And look at what we see in our world right now. So in terms of fake experts, tonight we'll be talking to an astrophysicist about the solar system. And to balance his views, we've invited a member of the Flat Earth Society. Now, how many times do we see those kinds of things on the news? Fair and balanced. But they're not fair and balanced. One has knowledge and the other has an opinion. And how many times do we see that? Using spokespeople with no relevant expertise to cast doubt on the expert consensus. Relax, I have a bachelor in computer science. Not exactly the one I want doing an operation on me. Okay? But how many times do we see, quote, experts used who really do not have the knowledge to be speaking on that particular subject. Okay. When we talk about magnified minorities, look at the myth at the top. That statement is true. 31,000 dissenting scientists prove there's no expert agreement on human-caused global warming. Well, let's look at several factors there. Premise one, a large proportion of people with science degrees dissent against human-caused global warming. However, what we're doing is magnifying a minority. That only represents 0.3% of over 10 million people with science degrees in the United States. So 31,000, it sounds like a humongous number, but it's not that many people at all. Now, premise number two, people with science degrees are experts on climate change. Now, while all the signatories of the petition have science degrees, 99.9% have no expertise in climate science. And that's a really important point, because we do see scientists on TV who will tell us that there's no global warming. But then when you look for their credentials, you discover that they're not climate scientists at all. I know someone I know was telling me, all these scientists have said this. And so I said, well, send me the articles you're reading and let me look for myself at what they're saying. So she sent me 5 or 6 articles and I dutifully read every one of them. And then I looked at who wrote the article. And 8 out of 8 were employed by oil companies. So they had a science degree, but they had no knowledge at all about climate science. So our conclusion here then is there is no expert agreement on human-caused climate warming because those people disagree. But unless we really looked at who is speaking, we fall into the trap of believing. So then we look at logical fallacies. These are false arguments leading to an invalid conclusion or an error of reasoning. They're flawed statements that often sound true, and they're often used to strengthen an argument. But if the reader detects them, the argument can backfire and damage the writer's credibility. Okay, so meanwhile, at the presidential candidate debate, I stand against going to war. And the one on the right says, since you are against war, you must be against our troops. Now, the two have nothing to do with each other. Okay. But you see the people at the bottom, against our troops? Is she really? And how many times have we seen that in political debates where some facts were used, where the grain of it was true, but then it was totally taken to a place where it was never meant to be? Okay, ad hominem is using spokespeople. Okay, so don't be persuaded by ad hominem attacks, which criticize a person and not the facts. Right? So this can work in several different ways. But in this case, they're talking about, I don't like the person, so therefore I don't like what that person is saying. And that happens frequently as well. That can't be true because you're an idiot. Okay? That's what that is really saying. Okay, who cares about the real issues? So we have the personal attack fallacy here. Can we let a shrimp like this run our great country? How many times do we hear things like that? The non sequitur. It's a fallacy committed when a conclusion does not follow logically from its given premise. Climate has changed naturally in the past, so current climate change must be natural. Well, does that mean then that humans have died naturally in the past, so that this death must be natural? That's following a logical fallacy. Or then there's the red herring, and we are seeing tons of this today. Distractions that have nothing to do with the argument. The balance of evidence tells us that humans are causing global warming. And so thwack, you get hit with a red herring, which has nothing to do with global warming or climate change, but totally distracts you from what the real issue is. Mom, I want that toy. honey, let's rush home. Yummy treat for you. So just like the mother here is trying to divert her kid's attention, how many times do we see, as we're watching the news, someone trying to divert our attention from what the real issue is? Then there's oversimplification. People died of cancer before cigarettes were invented, so smoking doesn't cause cancer. Okay, you see what's happening with all of these? Okay, they're leading to false conclusions, but they're making you think that it's perfectly normal. So we have misrepresentation. Here's the fact. Coral reefs will suffer permanent damage from global warming and ocean acidification. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing that already in the Great Barrier Reef, where half of it is gone. The myth is that coral reefs can recover like they have in the past. The fallacy is it took millions of years in the past for coral reefs to recover from mass extinction events. Then there's jumping to conclusions. The fact is that species become extinct when climate change is too fast for them to adapt. Currently, species are becoming extinct at similar rates to past mass extinctions. The myth is that species can adapt to climate change. The fallacy is that just because species can adapt to gradual climate change doesn't mean they can adjust to the rapid climate change happening now. And earlier on, when we were talking about, 350 being the highest level of CO2 released, which is comfortable for human beings, and we're going above that, are we going to be able to adapt to what's happening, to the tipping points that we're already crossing over? So what scientists say, we need to halve CO2 emissions within 12 years to avoid dangerous climate change. And what the deniers distort? Alarmists say the world will end in 12 years. Therefore, I don't have to worry about climate change. Birds fly, so gravity is a hoax. You're jumping to conclusions. Then we have the slippery slope fallacy. This logical fallacy occurs when someone argues without providing adequate evidence that a certain action or proposition will lead to an undesirable outcome via a series of events. Here's the slippery slope. And John Cook says this is actually what his father said to him. If you don't do a PhD, you'll end up living in the streets in torn jeans. And he told him that when he said he really wanted to be a cartoonist instead of a scientist. Now, the one does not necessarily lead to the other. And to conclude, I leave you with this. If we enact any kind of gun control laws, the next thing you know, we won't be allowed to defend ourselves against terrorist attacks. And when that happens, terrorists will take over our country. Therefore, gun control laws will cause us to lose our country to terrorists. Have we heard these kinds of arguments before? Yeah, we're hearing them now. Every time we talk about gun control, these are the kinds of things that are brought up. When we talk about the climate change agenda, there are those who say it's going to lead to socialism, then to communism, then to tyranny. And we know that that's not true. But some people are convinced that it is because it's repeated over and over and over again. So in 1967, Loving versus Virginia allowed blacks and whites to marry. Just you watch, now that blacks can marry white people, marrying house pets is just around the corner. In 2003, we allowed gays to marry. If gays can marry, legal incest and bigamy will come next. It's inevitable. And we've seen all of this. Never sing in the shower. Singing leads to dancing. Dancing leads to slipping. And slipping leads to paramedics seeing you naked. So remember, don't sing. Then we have impossible expectations. This demands unrealistic standards of proof before acting on the science. However, deniers exploit uncertainty by promoting the misconception that science is about absolute proof. And everyone who is educated at all knows that that's not true, that science is not about absolute proof. It's about continually evaluating and at times changing when new information becomes available. So here's the myth. Cold weather disproves global warming. Remember a couple of years ago, there was a senator who stood up in the Senate and held up a snowball as proof that there was no global warming. So premise one here is someplace is cold. Impossible expectation says global warming doesn't mean events don't happen, just that they're less likely to happen, because premise two says no place can experience cold during global warming. Therefore, the conclusion is that global warming isn't happening. And we've had a lot of skeptics after our very cold winter here. Okay, the fact global warming has made hot days more likely. That's the fact. So when we look at that release of CO2 and we look at how much hotter the climate has gotten, it's a climate that has changed, not a weather event. The myth is that it's cold, so global warming isn't real. The fallacy is that global warming doesn't mean no more cold days. It means cold events are less likely to happen. And there he is with his snowball. Okay. So here's the scientist. Here's the evidence for global warming. And Cranky says, we're not warming. So we lower our expectations. She says, here are two snapshots of Mars. Oh my gosh, Mars is warming. Doesn't bother me. It's cold, therefore global warming doesn't exist. Does that mean because it's dark that the sun doesn't exist? Then we have moving the goalposts, and we are seeing an awful lot of this in our environment these days. Starting today, the job requires a PhD. Feel free to apply for your own job. Whew, luckily, I have a PhD. You do? Well, the job requires also an Olympic gold medal. Synchronized swimming, 1992. Oh, and it also needs a posthumous Congressional Medal of Honor. So we keep moving the goalposts as to what's necessary. Climate change will cause warmer winters. Climate change will cause warmer winters. Oh, it's snowing. Climate change will cause colder winters. So we just keep changing the goalposts. You'll hit the ground in 12 to 15 seconds. Get back to me when you have more certainty. Okay, then we have cherry picking. This involves focusing on select pieces of data while ignoring anything conflicting with the desired conclusion. My argument is O. Mine is X, and I can prove it with X data. So I just cherry pick the information that will confirm what I want to believe. So we have, this should see, fact check cherry picking. Okay, notice there is one set of blue cherries there, but I just pick that one. So selective cherry picking could have you thinking this is a blue cherry tree. But if I look at the rest of it, I realize no. But how many times do we see ads that only pull out a few little ideas and don't show us the big picture? The fact is that climate change will impact all aspects of society, including agriculture, health, infrastructure, and the environment. The myth is that warm periods are good for people. The fallacy is that it ignores all the impacts of global warming. Use the CRS database to size the market. That data is wrong. Then use the SIBS database. That data is also wrong. Can you average them? Sure, I can multiply them too. We can make statistics say anything we want it to say, and we've seen that happen repeatedly. I feel hot in my armor, so the whole world must be warm. Thank you, Sir Cherry Pick. Then we have slothful induction. It ignores relevant evidence when coming to a conclusion, similar to cherry picking, but with emphasis on neglecting information. I'm thinking about all of the advertisements we have on TV for medicines. I had a friend from London visiting me, and she sat there and laughed and laughed and laughed every time one of those advertisements came on. Because she said at the very end of every one, you could die from that medication, but you have all these smiling people running around. And in little teeny tiny letters at the bottom, it says could cause and gives you a whole list of all of the, consequences of taking that could happen if you took that medication. That's slothful induction. This sensor detects infrared heat to guide our missiles. Science is awesome. This sensor detects infrared heat from the increased greenhouse effect. Science is a hoax. I don't want to see it. So I just say it's not there. Fact, COVID-19 is deadlier and more infectious than influenza. If unchecked, it will kill millions. The myth, fewer people have died from COVID-19 than the flu, so it's less of a threat. Now, we're using slothful induction here. Focusing on the number of deaths now ignores that future deaths will spike if COVID-19 spreads unchecked. This is like falling from a height and concluding halfway down that there's no problem because you haven't been hurt yet. And then there are anecdotes. How to make a scientist's head explode. Anecdotal evidence isn't valid. Yes, it is. I once used an anecdote as evidence and learned later it turned out I was right. Of course, we can all find anecdotal evidence to support whatever it is we want to believe in, but that doesn't make it scientifically accurate. Then we have conspiracy theories, and I think this one is a really good one for today, and I love the diagram at the bottom there. These theories exaggerate claims about the power of the conspirators. Any evidence against the conspiracy is further proof of the conspiracy. So the information is on the left. In the second is knowledge. But notice in the third, we're only choosing those parts of the information that confirm our conspiracy theory. We leave out everything else that doesn't fit into that category. When people feel threatened, they're more prone to turn to conspiracy theories. It gives them more sense of control to imagine that rather than random things happening, there are shadowy groups controlling it. Randomness is very discomforting to people. What if we can actually breathe in space, but the government doesn't want us to escape? Your conspiracy theory is harming our country. Now, we've seen every one of these conspiracy theories in the last couple of years. Vaccines cause autism. Obama wiretapped Trump Tower. Obama was born in Kenya. Climate change is a hoax. Windmills cause cancer. Millions of illegal voters. All of those are conspiracy theories. I love this one. Neil Armstrong was the first person to walk on the moon. Neil, L-A spelled backwards, is alien. I never thought of that, but that's how conspiracy theories get started. And some people are just plain immune to evidence. Mr. Hound, we must reduce our use of fossil fuels. It's clearly causing global warming. Not for me, won't be a problem. What evidence? We know that the evidence today is overwhelming, and yet we still have so many people who simply don't want to hear the evidence. They don't want to believe it's happening. We of the World Bank have released a report stating climate change is real and will have dire consequences, and they did several years ago. Well, what do you expect from a bunch of radical tree-hugging extremists like bankers? Bankers are not usually radical extremists. So we've broken all kinds of climate records with ice melts, with heat waves, with monthly temperatures. But we still have deniers. It's a hoax. It's just weather. It's a hoax. It's just weather. And when you listen to the same thing over and over and over again, and you don't allow yourself to hear another side of the story, you come to believe it's true. We see that with our news media today. It depends on what you watch, what you believe, and you leave out everything else that doesn't agree with what your personal thoughts are. We're seeing misinformation blitzes all over. Conspiracy theories, casting doubt, cherry picking, denying data, ad hominem, attack consensus. But the climate facts are there. And what we see here is oil and gas companies paying big bucks to the scientists who are promoting the hoax that climate change isn't real. Okay. And yet what we have learned, and I found this very interesting, is that the same law company who helped the cigarette companies when they were being accused of, putting forth a product that caused cancer, it's the same companies that are now providing the advertisements about fossil fuels. If I have misinformed further, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. So climate science deniers, that's what the gentleman there is talking about. And the gentleman smoking down below says, you don't have to be right, just create doubt. And think about all the things we see today that are trying to create doubt. Climate change, my butt. Look at this snow. Cut. Okay, again from the top, but with more hubris. Okay, so they're creating advertisements using people, using environments that don't even exist. Climate Change Deniers of America annual conference. No hurricane can shake us out of our conviction. I used to agree with you that climate change was real until I found out how much it would cost to fix it. But take a look at this. Comparing the cost of climate action versus climate inaction. So the policy cost in 2100 was down at that far left end, and we're talking about trillions of US dollars. The damages by 2100 are now costing over $20 trillion. And look at by 2200. I've actually been moving upward since we started sinking. And I think we're seeing that today when we hear people who are very wealthy saying that the economy is just fine, but not looking at the fact that the other end of the boat is sinking. We are destroying Earth. Research concludes this. Could you kindly rephrase that in equivocal, inaccurate, vague, self-serving, and roundabout terms that we can all understand? So what we're asked to do is find a spectrum of allies. Okay? And the spectrum of allies looks like this. In the center are the neutral parties. They're not sure one way or the other. On the bottom left are the very active people, the active allies, the ones we might protest with. The next widget is our allies. They believe it. They might not go out to protest, but they do believe in climate change. And those three groups are those with whom we can organize, those with whom we can talk about climate change and address the issues that are before us. Sometimes we can even do it with opponents. But what the site trainingforchange.org says is when you have active opponents who refuse to believe, don't even try to change their minds. Work with those that you can work with to make a difference. When you disagree on climate change, find areas where you do agree. Okay? So for instance, if you're a mom, talk about the future you want for your children. And you'll find that you all agree you want a healthy future for your children. Be open and kind, not judgmental. Keep calm when tensions rise. And then have some conversation goals. What do you want to get out of this conversation? You have to accept that you may not change the other person's mind. But if you can leave with having given them something to think about and not in anger, you've accomplished a goal. And sometimes we have to disagree with someone you care about, and that's okay. And sometimes we have to know when to end the conversation. We know that it's not going to go anywhere. But we want to be proactive, okay? Climate change is caused by two things: human activity and human inaction. And the world is saying, maybe people will notice if I tweet a selfie. So what are some of the solutions and approaches to climate change mitigation? And at the UN, we talked frequently about adaptation and mitigation. And so adaptation was when we could still adapt to some of the things that were changing. But now we're moving into the area of mitigation. How do we lessen it? So we have to phase out fossil fuels. We know that. We need to engage with more renewables, engage in more green technology, electric mobility, and curb deforestation. So what we want to be doing is reforest, reduce meat consumption, go to a more plant-based diet, curb population growth, capture carbon capture and storage technologies. Why care? Let's look at this iceberg here, okay? We need to perceive the invisible of climate change. Okay, so above the iceberg, warmer climate, no problem, good for me. I can certainly say that. I lived in the tropics and semi-tropics half my life. I don't like cold weather, but I know that it's not good for the climate. Okay, what can it cause? It can cause dramatic food increases due to the impact on agriculture. When I was living in Florida, my parents retired down there, and they retired about an hour north of Orlando. And I was living in Miami at the time, and I would drive up to see them. And when I would get off the Florida Turnpike, about 30 miles south of where they lived, a little bit, maybe an hour north of Orlando, there were nothing but orange groves for as far as the eye could see. Now there's not a single orange grove left. They had 4 years in a row of freezing temperatures and killed all the orange trees. So we see a dramatic food cost increase, and it is due to its impact on agriculture. We see increased frequency of extreme weather events. We see water scarcity due to droughts and the melting of glaciers. We see human migrations and a higher number of climate refugees. And I go to a parish here in Cincinnati where 70% of our parishioners are from Guatemala. And they are here because of the drought in their own country, and there was no food left in the areas in which they lived. That's why they migrated, not because they wanted jobs here, not because they wanted a better life for their children, but they also wanted to survive. And that's happening in many places in Africa as well. So 98.4% of the countries in the world at the Paris agreed to the Paris Convention, and they agreed to act on climate change. There were only 3 countries that are not part of that agreement. Nicaragua, because they didn't feel that the agreement went far enough. Syria was in the midst of a war and didn't even attend. And of course, the USA has withdrawn again from the Paris Agreement. So, every other country in the world is agreeing to work on this. And we know that the agreements that they came up with at the Paris Convention were not enough, but at least it was a beginning. And now we see that we've withdrawn from that. So we're not even part of what could be happening. And what we also know is that those who contribute the least greenhouse gases will be most impacted by climate change. And so where you see the blue, that's the low emissions. And you see all of the wealthy countries with the highest emissions. But then when we look at the vulnerability to climate change, look at where the people are most vulnerable, those who have caused the least. We put 40 pounds of CO2 into the air for every pound of household trash we put into landfills. And eventually this may be what we say. It's just a heat wave. I still think global warming is a crock. Harold, this is Wisconsin. And so look at the environment. Birds fly, so gravity is a hoax. Revolution or apocalypse? I thought we had more time to choose. You don't. So what motivates climate scientists? I'm sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. Discovering something no one knows. This data shows the oceans aren't absorbing all our CO2 emissions. I'm thinking of calling it the killing squiggle. Understanding our world. Human fingerprinting shows a discernible human influence on climate. And making the world a better place. Our climate model tells us how global warming will impact us to help us prepare for our responses. What doesn't motivate climate scientists? Research grants. After paying grad students, overhead costs, and publication fees, we only have funds for this office chair. Impressing non-scientists. My latest climate model has a resolution of only 10 kilometers. And money. None of these things are what motivate climate scientists. What is motivating climate scientists is to help us to understand the danger that we are in and the tipping points that we are reaching, which are irreversible. Oops, sorry, I'm on the wrong side. And so we see again, we are destroying the earth, but we have politicians everywhere trying to tell us that it's not real, it's inaccurate, it's vague, it's self-serving. What if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? Energy independence, preserve rainforests, sustainability, green jobs, livable cities, renewables, clean water, and healthy children. What if it's a big hoax and that's what we create? And so climate change is also a moral issue, which is one of the reasons we're doing this through Faith Communities Go Green. Okay? And about 4 years ago, the United Nations Environment Program, in collaboration with the World Parliament of Religions, wrote a book called Faith for Earth, A Call for Action. And the book is available to download online. It is about 178 pages. But the book goes through multiple religious traditions and show how all of them are talking about the importance of caring for God's creation. They might use different terminology, but every single tradition that is listed in that book, and it is multiple, are all talking about the need to care for creation. And they said that the purpose for writing the book is because the most important thing that is absent in all of this dialogue about climate change is the moral voice. And it is faith traditions that bring that moral voice. And so we see multiple religious traditions putting forth declarations. In the Catholic Church, it was Laudato Si. In the Muslim church, or the Muslim churches, it's Il Misan, which is a sense of belonging. And as I read it, I realized that Pope Francis could have written that just as he had written Laudato Si. It is saying the same kinds of things. There is an ecumenical and interreligious guidebook on caring for our common home. This is coming out from traditions everywhere. And it is that moral voice that is so necessary today. So what are you going to do about it? Okay, so if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Just unmute yourselves. but I think his way of presenting the information makes it very understandable. And I think the tools that he uses to show us how misinformation spreads is relevant not just to climate change, but to so much that we see happening in the world today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. It was an excellent presentation.
Well, thank you.
I wanted
Yes.
to echo that too. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're most welcome. Sue?
Well, I'm backing you, I'm with you, but I'm thinking, so what are the most important things, or two or three that are most important to do that I can do, or many of the people on this call can do?
Well, I think one thing we've tried to work with, even with my own religious congregation, is can we eat less meat? Because we know that cows produce 25% of the methane gases released in this country. And so that's something that every one of us can do. Move to a more plant-based diet. Okay? It's to stay informed. So join a group like Faith Communities Go Green, or Sierra Club, or National Wildlife, to join something so that you're together with other people and continually increasing your own knowledge. Reading Susan Vogt's monthly monthly tips. If you are not familiar with them, Sue puts out, is it weekly or monthly, Sue?
Weekly eco tips.
Weekly eco tips, which are absolutely excellent. What's the website, Sue?
Well, I put them on Faith Communities Go Green, or you can just email me at susanvogt.com and I will put you on my direct email list.
Okay, and she does
Susan
has done
Vogt
a
1.
wonderful job with those because she gives you, this is the action, and here's an easy one, but then here's a harder one too. So she really challenges you. And so that again is something else I think we can be doing. How do we challenge ourselves? You know, how many of us take plastics that can't be put in Rumpke down to the reuse
hub.
recycle center, down to the hub, because they're reusing and recycling a ton of stuff. If you haven't been down to the hub, it's on Evans Street, and it's a fascinating place to go. And they take empty toothpaste tubes, empty coffee bags, old shoes, jeans, all kinds of things that Rumpke does not take. But they also have a warehouse floor filled with stuff that people have given that can be used again. And you can just go in there and take anything you need. If you're a gardener, you can go in there and get gardening tools. You can get flower pots. If you're in education, they have all kinds of educational materials that people have given them. And it's all free. So that's something else that you can do.
I'm a huge reader, and the library supplies me with books that I hear about. I recommend the 5-Ton Life. That's a recommendation of how us in this country, if we would all work on getting our carbon footprint down to 5 tons, it would make a huge difference. And she tells us some reasons how or ways that we can do that. Another book that I recently read was What If We Get It Right? And she interviewed all these different people about what they're doing. Like, the guy with 350.
Oh, Bill McKibben.
Yes, I knew. It's like senior moment. And I get a magazine called Green Business, and they tell you how that you would change. They have a directory about looking at your insurance because insurances insure fossil fuels and they also invest in fossil fuels, and have another directory on get a new bank. And these are things that are not that hard to do.
Okay, thank you, Carol. And
Yeah.
that's why it's good to belong to a group
Yeah.
like this, because we learn from each other. Anybody else have any other ideas of how you might be working to eliminate your carbon footprint?
Last year,
If I can intersect here, we have a book club, and Carol would love for you to participate. I'm going to show on the screen the draft flyer because I have question marks because, but these are not question marks anymore, but this was my draft. And you should be getting this flyer in a few days. So, and you're all on this our email list. So we're going to be reading The Overstory, a novel by Richard Powers. And here's a picture of the cover. And it's also on our website now. Under the Take Action tab, we have a list of books. We have a list of movies. So if you're an avid reader, especially in climate change, please join us and share your interest in climate change books with avid readers who are participating. We have about 12 people that come to each meeting. So I'm encouraging everybody here. Several of you that are on this call are in fact members of the book club, and we love seeing you again. We are rotating our, and again, sorry for the space, but we're rotating our facilitators. Susan recommended this book and she's happy to facilitate it. And I do now have the registration link. So I sent it to our person who puts all this information. You will be getting the flyers soon.
That's
The
another book that I've read, and I loved it. It's a great book.
It's a very interesting book. And we have several other books as well. And I know Mimi, I mentioned before, is working with the public library so that we can let them know that we are a member of the Faith Communities Go Green Book Club, and they have copies reserved for us, so you don't have to pay in Hamilton County. You can just tell them what branch you're at and they will send you a copy of the book. They have the list of books all the way through July that we are going to be reading. The other thing I want to mention is we have the advocacy group, and Ariel, who leads that, sends a newsletter monthly to people who sign up for it. So she doesn't want to burden people with information they're not interested in. But if you're interested in politics and climate change at the Ohio state level, and I know that I recognize there are a few people here who are from Kentucky, but they still are interested in what's happening in Ohio because, you know, what goes around comes around. So she gives advice and phone numbers on who to call, what to say, what the latest bill is. And in order to get onto her mailing list, you can either send me an email at info@fcgg.org, or if you have my personal email list, you know, if you haven't emailed me before, it may go to my spam and I won't find it. But the info@fcgg.org, I do find. So anyways, that you want to do. And as the other thing is that we have with Becca, who I think she's on. I'm looking. Becca, raise your hand if you're here. I don't see her at the
I was
moment.
here earlier.
I think she had a drop.
Yeah, I think she had to leave.
So we have the Eco Challenge, which is similar to what Susan does, but this is more in depth, and it's a game. It's a challenge. You sign up to be on our team. And last year, our team placed in the top 10%. This is worldwide. We're competing against other teams, and it's a lot of fun. You get to talk to each other. You can talk with each other on other teams. You can talk with each other on our team. But they have a lot of really detailed, fascinating information. It's based on the book and research in the Drawdown book. So that's another avenue that you may be interested in.
They also have lots of ideas of what you can do in a number of different categories.
Yes, absolutely. It seems like I'm missing something else. We have the Midwest Sustainability Summit coming up. And that, if you go to Green Umbrella's website and click on the Midwest Sustainability Summit, or just Google that direct, that has a lot of, it's a conference with a lot of professionals. And if you're interested in getting more specific information, climate information, it's an excellent program to go to. It's not free, but if you are not able to pay, you can write to the administrator, the coordinator at Green Umbrella, and they do offer some scholarships.
And I think Kathy,
I don't want to
Joanne,
forget
is it
to read-
okay if
Yes.
I,
go ahead, Kathy.
okay. April 27th is when Mount Auburn Presbyterian Church is celebrating Earth Day, because Earth Day happens to fall on Easter. We're having a multi-faith church service and Sunday school. So first, the Sunday school, there'll be 4 speakers. Becca and Fred, Desai, if I'm saying their last name properly. There'll be a woman from the Quaker community, Buddhist community, and Islamic community, all talking about climate change and their spiritual beliefs. The church service starts at 11, and CJ is giving the message or the sermon. We will have those people I've already mentioned in the church service. In addition, we will have Susan Carlson from Ben Adam, and and anyway, and then there'll be music of different faiths, etc. We're not trying to convert anybody, but this is a big problem. This is not a Presbyterian, a Catholic, or a Jewish problem. It's all of our problem. And as you beautifully said, it fits into all of these religious communities' faith beliefs that we need to be carers of the earth. So if you want, I will get information to Joanne. It hopefully can be put in the Green Umbrella information. And otherwise, you can, I'm not sure exactly what to tell you. We can put it maybe in the notes. It's Downey, DOWNEYKA at uc.edu. And I can give you the details, the address, etc. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Kathy.
I want to add to that anytime you have a program at your house of worship that is open to everybody, and it addresses our mission, which has to do with caring for the earth as far as climate, you are absolutely welcome to post it on our Facebook page. And that way everybody could see it. And the way to get the link to it is to go to our website, and at the bottom of the page, the screen or whatever, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see a little Facebook icon. Click on that, that'll take you to the page, and you may have to join, which is just signing up. And then you are free to post your announcement. So Kathy, that would be a good place. I see Renee has her hand raised. And so I'm assuming you have
Thank
something.
you. I just wanted to share something really exciting that I just found out this evening. First of all, I'm sorry I was late. I thought it was 7:30 instead of 7. But I just filed my taxes last Saturday, the 22nd, and I claimed a credit for having installed a heat pump last January, and I got the refund today. So I just wanted to share that.
Well,
Yeah,
Wonderful. I understand that those refunds will continue through at least 2026. The IRA, which is the
Structure Reduction Act.
can't say, yeah, Reduction Act. It was supposed to go through 2032, and the IRS has guaranteed through 2026, and they're hoping that it will continue through 2032 as promised originally. But as you know, we're in kind of strange times, so we will find out day by day. But congratulations, that's very exciting.
thank you.
Thank you all very much for coming. Have a blessed evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, we didn't get Teresa's comment, did we? Sister Teresa,
You still there?
for the people that are still on, do you want to tell us what you were going to say? You're still muted.
I wasn't going to say anything except thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I thought you had an announcement.
Bye-bye.
But
No.
you can put it in our Facebook page.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Good night.
Good night.